Welcome to this edition of Overtures. This one's called What is Opera? Now, the usual reply is that opera is fully sung, that is, no dialogue. If this were true, then Mozart's The Abduction from the Seraglio and The Magic Flute would not be operas since both have dialogue. So does The Daughter of the Regiment and Beethoven's Fidelio. So if the criteria is no dialogue, then The Phantom of the Opera and Les Miserables would both be classified as operas, since they are pretty much sung throughout. The answer is not in the form, but the style of music employed to propel the dialogue. Operas employ what we might call art music, that is, that musical style which has its roots in the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century we called classical music. Just as jazz, hip-hop, R&B, chamber music have their own particular musical language, which makes them distinct from other languages, so too does opera. It is characterized by the unamplified, full-throated, hyper-natural gymnastics the opera singer creates with their voice, accompanied by a full symphony orchestra and a large chorus. The American musical developed in the first part of the 20th century from the European tradition of opera and operetta, and the operetta musical tradition is very much in the vein of Mozart, Beethoven, and Brahms, the best example of which is Johann Strauss's Die Fledermaus, or The Bat. Indeed, American musicals through the 1960s had more in common with operetta than those of the 1980s and onward. Works like Oklahoma, Sound of Music, West Side Story were built on the same musical language as the classics. Anyone remember Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy? Trained opera singers performing the music of Richard Rodgers like it was an operetta, or the great opera bass Ezio Pinza performing in South Pacific. The musical language of the American musical changed as popular music changed. Today, works like Hamilton employ popular music to tell their stories. This makes great sense since the goal of musicals is to entertain. How best to entertain? Speak the language of the public. This is a short-term, double-edged sword, since musical tastes are constantly changing. If Handel had been in the audience for the first performance of La Bohème, I imagine he would have described it as a bunch of noise, the performers screaming rather than singing. As tastes change, what was popular one or two generations earlier is no longer popular. Does anyone perform the musicals of Sigmund Romberg anymore, or indeed the musicals of Rodgers and Hammerstein? Only perhaps as a curiosity or in academic institutions. And so, to answer the question, what is opera, I would say it is a theatrical art form whose inspiration comes from ancient Greek theater that synthesizes drama, music, singing, spoken word, and spectacle to tell stories of the human condition. The element that makes opera different than other art forms is its use of what we call today classical music and that classical singing style that was created primarily in the 17th century. It is the music that has given opera its longevity, that famous music that we often hear today in commercials, movies, and TV shows. And with that, and as always, Viva Verdi!